Well, many of you may think that the whole situation between liberals and conservatives is a new issue, but it goes all the way back to the times of Jesus and likely a long time before that. We have today in AD 30 event number 7. You see, Tuesday and Wednesday kind of run together as far as the believers of the scriptures go. They have a hard time separating the events of Tuesday and Wednesday. And so there are 12 events recorded just on this one day leading into the crucifixion. And this time it's not the Pharisees and the scribes and the church elders, the chief priests, but it's the Sadducees who come. You say, well, Pastor, that gets awful confusing. Pharisees, scribes, priests, elders, and now we got Sadducees. How do I keep them all apart? Well, the Sadducees are the easiest group of all to keep apart because they were ones that did not believe in the resurrection. So they were sad, you see. They didn't believe in the resurrection, so they were sad, you see. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Sadducees. They thought that religion was a good thing to live by, but they also thought that the poor were poor because God had held back his blessings from them. They were an elite group. They were a liberal thinking group. They thought religion was a good thing to hang on to, but that there was no life after death. And so it was a religion, if you will, of works and of ethics and morals, but it was all just show. There was no real belief in the scriptures, as we know that the scriptures are without error, and they picked and chose the types of scriptures they wanted to believe. So this group of people that didn't believe in the resurrection came to Jesus, and they wanted to discredit him by asking a question that they thought would trip him up. And they went all the way back to the law of Deuteronomy 25:5 that Moses had given. And you got to understand the whole thinking of that day. But if a first son were to marry and he were to have a wife, and his wife were to bear no children, they wanted the money to stay in the family and the family name to continue. So the next son would be forced to marry the first son's wife if, in fact, he died without any children. And so these Sadducees took this to the extreme, and they said, okay, suppose there's 7 brothers, and the first one dies and there's no children, so the second one has to marry, and there's no children, and the third one has to marry. And they go all the way through to 7 brothers having married this one woman and have born no children, and she dies, and they ask a loaded question. They say, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Well, there's a serious problem here. First of all, it's a ridiculous example, but nevertheless, even if it weren't, they just didn't understand Scripture. They didn't understand heaven. They didn't understand God and his power. And so Jesus puts them straight real quickly. He says, in the resurrection, it's not like it is here on earth. So that's the first change. The first change is, and not only will be no sickness, no mourning, no pain, no suffering, but we're not going to have the physical need to have children. We're not going to have the same physical urges for sexual relationship. And he says, and we're going to live eternally like the angels. Now, please, when you read this passage of scripture, don't think that when somebody dies, they become an angel. He says we'll be like angels in one respect, in the fact that we're eternal at that point when we are resurrected, but not that we're going to be like angels in every way, just in the fact that we're going to be eternal. And we'll have a different mindset, obviously, than we have here on earth and in this life here on earth. But then he does one more step. He goes right back to the very person that they've been quoting, which is Moses. And he says, no, wait a minute, if you're going to use Moses, let me tell you about Moses. Do you remember at the burning bush when Moses was talking? He said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am. You see, he believed in the resurrection. He believed that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were living eternally in heaven. And so it's very, very important that Jesus get this point across. The very one that you're quoting about this ridiculous example is the one that said, I am the God of living, not of the dead. And he says, you're mistaken. Your reasoning is wrong. You don't understand the scriptures. You don't understand the power of God. And you need to understand there's a fact. This is this is one of those things. If we had political correctness on Facebook today, we would say fact check. Fact check is Moses said, I am the God of the living, not the God of the dead. And you're greatly mistaken. And he had done such a wonderful job in answering this challenge of absurdity with the Pharisees, scribes, and the Sadducees, because they were Sadducees. He was so good in answering this question and making them aware that heaven is not like earth, and there will not be marriage or giving in marriage. And so the question is mute. It doesn't matter who the last husband was or who the first husband was. We're not going to have those kind of relationships. We're going to love one another. We're going to be aware of one another, but we don't have the same physical drives, the same need for fellowship, and the same need for a union that we have here on earth. And so he says, you're greatly mistaken. You don't understand that there is a resurrection. Even Moses was told by God, I am the God of the living. And the crowd, the multitude that was gathered around, according to Matthew, says they were astonished at his teachings. Now, this is found in Matthew 22, it's found in Luke 20, and it's found in Mark 12. So you can read all three accounts, and it's really important, again, that you do, because there's some extra words in this that help you to understand it. But remember, we're not like angels in every respect. We're only like angels in the fact that we're eternal. We got to remember that heaven and earth are two different places with two different mindsets and two different needs. And so there's no marriage in heaven. That doesn't mean we won't know our wives. It doesn't mean we won't know our husbands. We will, but we won't have the same physical needs, the same physical desires. And we're going to love one another, and there'll be no more tears and no more sorrow. And I believe that when we start comparing life in heaven with here on earth, we make a terrible mistake, because it's going to be two different realms totally. And the one that we're looking forward to is so much better than the one that we have. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you. Have a great day.